Hey everyone, great to see you. Today we'll talk about innovating better with think tanks. Welcome to Invincible Innovation Live. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm Mazor, Kario, innovation and value creation expert, and I'll be your host. And my guest today, I'm so happy to have Erez Tsalik. Hey Erez, how are you?
Hello, I'm good. Happy.
So happy to see you with me. Erez is innovation expert from SIT, Systematic Inventive Thinking. We're live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook, and you're much invited to join the discussion and ask questions. We would be very happy to see you with us. So now we can start, Erez. You've been facilitating innovation and creativity workshops for so many years. Could you share a few tips for creativity?
Wow. I think maybe it's my responsibility first to distinct between innovation and creativity because we all tend not only to use them in the same sentence, but also kind of in the same meaning, and it's not. Creativity is that act of newness that we experience when we think of a new idea or a new solution. Um, Innovation is a business process designed to leverage on these ideas and solutions and turn them into a practical or pragmatic value. So creativity is on one hand very essential to the process of innovation, but at the same time it doesn't define it. It takes a very small, crucial but very small part or very certain step in the process. But so most of my focus is on innovation and creativity, but these are two separate areas. And now, if I repeat your question, the tips that you will hear are for more towards innovation or more towards creativity?
Let's start with creativity because I know that SIT is very experienced and known for its knowledge on creativity. So let's start with that.
Okay, so in terms of creativity, we're very curious about the way people think, especially the way creative people think when they create. Now, not invented by us, but there are many empirical studies since the 1950s that actually identify some cognitive patterns that are associated with it. Not only that, there's a study from I think the late 90s that shows that about 70 to 80% of the ideas and solutions that we will perceive as very creative are associated with these thinking patterns or with these cognitive processes. Now, this is great news because if it's true, if you can explain creativity through a cognitive process, then it should be really, really easy to test. How do you test it?
Theoretically.
Yeah. So how do you test it? You take someone who doesn't know how to think this way. You'll teach them how to think this way. And if by the end of the process, they come up with ideas and solutions that perceived by experts in their field, not only as good and new, but also as very creative and innovative, then you know that you got something that is working. And at SIT, this is exactly what we're doing. We're using these thinking processes or cognitive manipulations, if you will, to ensure that the thinking process will end up with ideas and solutions that are very creative. So in terms of tips, I think curiosity and motivation are probably the first two. And the third one will be discipline.
Yeah.
Because the only way to do it is to commit to it. You really have to make the time. You really have to make the focus. There are great stories about, people coming up with breakthrough ideas about while jogging or taking a shower. Yeah, great. I wouldn't invest in a company that's their innovation strategy.
Yeah.
Inspiration is probably not the best
yeah.
the best way to invest in innovation.
Or an apple on your head, something like that.
Yeah.
It's although Apple is called after that specific apple that fell on his head, so maybe sometimes it works. And we have Mete with us who said that it sounds impressive. So thanks, Mete, for joining us. So we started good if it's impressive. Most leaders are not satisfied with their innovation results. What is preventing them from a successful innovation process?
So I think when I look at corporates in the last 20 years, first innovation was embraced as something very unique. Then very quickly we replace we started to use the word innovation instead of using newnessness. So a company is now moving from I don't know, manual process to an automatic one. They call it innovation, even though the technology was invented years ago. A bank that now offer you services online call it innovation, even though it's been around forever, and all the competitors are doing the same. So
Yeah.
we like that word. It kind of makes us feel good about ourselves. So I think
Yeah.
for leaders to be more content with their innovation, because I don't think you should ever be satisfied. Okay, once you're
Never.
satisfied, you're not hungry anymore. But to be
Yeah.
content or to be appreciative of the innovation investments that you make in your organization, I think that our two main things will be results, measurable results, and I'll say something about that in a minute, and culture. Now, there's a lot to say about the culture of innovation. We maybe talk about it a little later. But in terms of results, um, if you choose any organization and we'll ask them to do the following for 1 year, to stop all their innovation activities, okay, the company will not disappear. People
No.
will still strive to come up with new and good ideas. Will still try to do better in everything that we do internally and externally. So innovation is not everything new. Innovation is not everything that I should have done years ago and only now I find the time to do that. Innovation is that
Mhm.
extra thing on top of newnessness. Um, so I think being able to measure results and being able to invest appropriately. There's absolutely no reason for a small organization to invest tons of money and time in innovation just because everybody else is doing it. Um, you can make very limited efforts, but get really good results. So I think
Mhm.
being disciplined about it, measure, compare, analyze, will save you a lot of money, but more importantly, a lot of frustration.
Yeah, like when you talked about measurement, this is something that like I've talked to many people, and they're thinking about how to measure it, and it's certainly not the exact same way that the organizations are used to measuring things in their core abilities and products. So how would you tell them? Yeah, it's different, but it's not the same measurement. What are the measurements? To really know that we're in the right direction.
So there are quite a few tools out there to measure and assess innovation from very economical point of view. So you look at dollars and cents, and you try to not only calculate the gain, but also the investment in terms of time, in terms of when people do innovation, they don't do other things. So that
Sure.
that, that opportunity cost is also something to consider.
Yeah.
So and also whose time. In most organizations, there's a call from top down for everybody to be more innovative. Um, when I meet managers, business leaders, and they talk about innovation enthusiastically and how important it is, usually I find the kind of a polite way to ask them what they have done innovatively lately. Um, Modeling works much better than training, for example. You see the people on the other team coming up with something amazing, and one of the first things that comes up to your mind is, I want to learn how to do what they're doing, because no one can argue with results. So I think, first of all, there are many tools out there to measure, and both from the economical side, but also from the innovation side. We look at how radical this is. We look how this new idea or set of ideas compare to other new ideas that emerge elsewhere. So it's not about how much are we happy with what we're doing, but also how does that measure compared to the investment and compared to the alternatives.
Yeah, but let's say that we have a business for 15 years. I'm just trying to make like the point clear. 15 years we've been doing something and we've making like lots of money from it. We're a factory, whatever. And then we want to try something else, which is disruptive and really different. And it's starting for a very small, like a startup, and it's growing. How can you measure what's going on in this small initiative that just started, the same way that you're measuring the numbers and the dollars and cents in something that you already know how to produce money out of, right? So
Right.
it's
Yeah.
different.
So there are different scales that compare areas of uniqueness, originality, impact, um, um, uh, um, IP, or the ability to protect your idea, or at least to have to hold it, for as long as you can. So the different variables that we use to measure that. We can talk about it. I think it's kind of a whole subject on its own, on,
Mhm.
on how you measure and assess innovation. You also have to do that from the softer aspects in terms of people's satisfaction, their feeling of job security, and their ability to improve their skills and change their skills. It's how you break silos. So many times the ripple effect of innovation should also be measured. And I know many companies maybe have very little innovation to show for on the shelf in the marketplace, but the efforts to get there uh, improve their internal processes, their compliance, their alignment, their communication. So you also want to pay attention to these things.
Yeah. And it's touching on the first thing that you mentioned, which is culture. So we're
Exactly.
doing both in the same way.
Yeah.
So, what is the most powerful way to enhance innovation?
Wow. I think, okay, uh, much like everything else in life, uh, learn how to do that. I mean, I feel that it's so unfair. I know it's a bit childish, but I feel it's unfair when business leaders or people expect other people to innovate without providing them the know-how and the time for it. Um, it's like, how would anyone know how to do that? Just by
Yeah.
sitting and thinking really hard, that doesn't work. We know that. We know that relying on our intuition doesn't work because it doesn't break fixedness and it doesn't change anything. On the contrary, it reinforces previous beliefs, and it is a strong victim of confirmation bias. We know that brainstorming um, doesn't work so well because it doesn't yield implementable results. The whole idea with brainstorming is to imagine that there's no constraints, to think out of the box, to imagine everything
Mhm.
is possible, which is great. It's very empowering, and it creates a really fun buzz. But you end up with a long list of exciting ideas, really exciting ideas that you have no way to implement. So in the long run, it creates frustration. People say, "Oh, we were good. We came up with great ideas. It's the management that didn't do anything with it." Well, these ideas were maybe, going back to your first question, maybe very creative, but not very innovative. Okay. So I think
Yeah.
the innovation process it starts when you declare your intention, when you kick off, and it ends when you finish assessing the results and extract some useful learnings out of it. It's not about ideation.
I think that what you mentioned about that you need to do it like systematically, you need to be persistent.
Mhm.
You see that in many companies, they know how to do a certain processes in a certain way. And they expect the innovation to be some kind of like in peaks, like a happiness all around, and just having great ideas, and then we're happy with it. And the grit, to take the idea and to make it a reality is something that it needs methods. It's not enough to say, yeah, I want to change, yeah, I have the power, I know how to pitch it, or something like that.
Right, right. I totally agree. And I think also in terms of our culture, we tend to idolize people who are outliers, which is great. Um, but when we see a video of the band we love, uh, we're really like at all with their musicality and how great they sing and play, etc. We absolutely don't think about the hundreds of hours they spend in a dark studio working on it, right? And the same goes with innovation. When you, I don't know, when you search on Google the top 10 innovation gurus, you know, it's like, okay, you see the results. We all hear about Steve Jobs, for example. It's great. But we only look at the outcome. We don't look at the days and months and years of hard work. Same goes with innovation. Most of the innovation around us is not glorified. When I look around me in the room that I sit in right now, um, there's not even one single innovation that was created by, a kind of a star innovator. Most of them were created by engineers who were sitting and just testing and checking persistently and systematically. The worst thing that could happen to you as an innovator is that you try to do something and a week later somebody else come up with a better idea and you realize that it was there all the time. You just didn't look at it because you were not thorough, you were not systematic. You're following your gut feeling or your intuition because, hey, that's much easier than forcing yourself, religiously. Say, this is my business responsibility. If there's an opportunity there, I'm going to find it. So I think it's also a cultural thing. It's part of our education.
Yeah, I heard that we have a bias that we know some of the brands, and for us, because we know them and they are consumer brands, we know that they are more creative, innovative, successful. And there are many brands that they are not B2C, they are not known, and they're doing incredible things in their own domain, and nobody heard about them because they are not, Apple, for
It's
example.
the power of positioning. I worked 3 years ago. I'm not going to mention any names, but I worked with an electronic and appliances giant, really one of the biggest Korean companies in the world. Um, and I worked with their innovation team, and I was kind of disappointed. Their innovation team is relatively small to such a huge company. Um, and I remember talking with one of their VPs, and I asked him about it, and he said, "Yeah, people don't know that, but we're a Me Too company. What we're really good at, okay, on a global scale, it's a huge company. What we're really good at are two things. We see what competitors are coming out with, we immediately adapt and improve, and we release it to the market. We always second or third, but with better products. And the second thing that we're really good at is positioning, because we position ourselves as a very innovative company, and it works for us.
Yeah.
And I don't
It,
judge that. For me, it's fine. If it works for you, great.
it apparently it works for them, but
Yep.
it's like you're the first to have an idea and you're like running fast and you're first and you get all the arrows in your back, and the ones who is after you will say, okay, now I can take the
Yeah.
battle. So
Yeah. And I
that's
think as consumers, many times we ask ourselves, do I want the first one in the market, or do I want the best one in the market?
Yeah, but it's not only that. It's not. Sometimes it doesn't get to any consumer. Sometimes it's
Right.
something that they would say, okay, why should we innovate? We could either take someone else doing the battle and I'll take it, or we can just merge. We can buy the competitors if they're bothering us that much, and we don't need that. So you see companies that they are not doing the effort and they're still very, very successful.
Yeah, I
When
think
when we talk about Apple, by the way, it's not like they invented everything that they are selling right now. We have to
exactly.
say that too.
Yeah, I think somebody. We were led to believe that innovation is a survival mechanism. If you won't innovate, you die. It's not true. It's not true. In the last 60,000 years, human were constantly working to improve their conditions and to better their abilities and skills, etc. So no, you don't have to do innovation. It's absolutely okay to stick to doing what you're doing really good. It's absolutely good to continue with R&D and with process excellence. These are great. Now, I think that these two are a must. If you want to innovate on top of it, that's great. Sometimes it's absolutely necessary, sometimes not, but it's a choice. It's a choice, and it's a choice that you have to, accept and embrace.
Yeah, but if you don't innovate and you don't change your business and don't merge these people, these companies to your, or take these people in, or do something, you don't have to call it innovation. But the market is changing. We see right now lots of change in the world. We're in the middle of the COVID crisis. Of everything is changing. So sometimes you could do the same thing and it will work. Sometimes not. and you need, it's
Right.
like insurance. You want to do it, it's insurance.
I agree. I agree. But I would also, yeah, but I would also pay for it as I pay for insurance. So for some, I ride a motorcycle. So the insurance that I have for for motorcycle driving is higher than any other things that I do in my life that are less risky. So I kind of, even that is something that I kind of try to be responsible about. So yeah, innovation is something that has some good business results, good promise for the future. I think that in today's world, it probably generate more value internally than externally. Uh, it's the world is changing also in terms of professions and expertise and processes. We are in a transition period now from the old world. It's funny to call it the old world of the
A
2000s.
year ago it was old.
Yeah. So for transition, innovation works best. Actually, when I look at it both in business terms and in economical terms, when you measure in innovation in terms of large impact, usually you see the best results in times of transitions. When everything is working well, innovation contribute, but not as much.
Yeah, but like what we have right now is maybe once in a lifetime. We will, I hope, will not
Oh
have
yeah.
these. But when it happens, if you don't have the expertise and the culture and the methods and knowledge in order to do change, sometimes you don't need it, but sometimes it's crucial for you as a business and as an organization. So and I believe that it's important, but I see that in many cases companies could really succeed and do well with, as you say, a very small team.
And I
Of
want to build on what you said now.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's true, and I think that intuitively, when we talk about innovation, um, we immediately associate it with product, services, and processes. Okay, that these are the main area. Now, there's a study from, it's an old one, it's from 2010, I think, uh, that measure for 10 years. They measure the investment and the return on innovation in many different companies around the world, across the board. So different categories, different cultures, different regions of the world. And what they find out was not surprising. They found out that most organizations in the world will put most of their innovation efforts around products and product performances. Okay, but when you measure the return, the ROI, the return on innovation, you discover that you get the highest return not on products and services and processes. Your highest return is on business model innovation. Yet, even though 12 years pass, most companies in the world still put all their innovation efforts on products and services and not on business model innovation. Not only that, the study shows that it's not only that you get more of your money back when you invest in business model innovation, you also get it much faster. The risk is smaller because you don't need to launch anything to the market. You run some economical models or you crunch some numbers and you see if your business model could work or not. You maybe launch it in one specific segment of your market and you experiment with that. So it's very low risk. The constraints are really clear. So the chance that you would do something completely wrong are close to zero. Okay. Yet in our minds, innovation is all about products and technologies, and it's not. It's there. But I want to expand that. So for me, one of the things that I would like to see in the business world today is that I don't want to say shift, but at least a better balance between product and services or market related innovation and business model innovation and strategy innovation and marketing innovation. Okay, I think that
Yeah.
these are the areas that should really get a boost now, especially with all the changes we're experiencing.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I think that it makes sense to think about products and services because it's like tangible. It's like obvious
Yeah.
that there is the result. This is how we see it, and so forth. And we're
Can I jump in? Can I jump in with my favorite example for that?
sure.
Okay, so we all credit, because you mentioned Apple and Steve Jobs. We all credit Apple for the iPhone, which is great. It's the first time in my life that I have some kind of an emotional bonding with a device. Um, but it's interesting to know that in the last 4 or 5 years, Apple didn't make a lot of money from the iPhone. Um, it's still an expensive technology. There were major investments to actually get there. Um, and in terms of um, revenue, um, oh, maybe I'll say something. First of all, in terms of innovation, the iPhone is an amazing device. It has a lot of great technology, amazing design, perfect integration. Uh, I'm out of superlatives. Again,
Yeah.
amazing positioning. Everything is great. It has very little innovation in there. Um, uh, there is innovation there, mostly again some engineering solutions that are brilliant. But the most innovative thing that Apple did, and the source for most of its revenue in these years, was not the iPhone. It was the iTunes. It's the business model behind it. Not many people know that, but in the first 3 years, Apple charges 20% of the revenue from every mobile provider that wanted to provide service for iPhone. So it's not the device, it's the business model behind it.
Yeah. And when they just launched it, when Steve went to the stage 2007, and it was only a phone and maybe a navigation system. It didn't have any application on it at the beginning. It just
Yep.
started afterwards.
Yep.
And then all the ecosystem of applications and all the connection and partners to that device and all the data, of course, on that device started to do something else. So what would you tell an innovation leader during these really hard times?
I'll start by sharing an observation and then maybe an advice. Uh, so I think at around April of last year, when it was clear that we're going towards a pandemic, um, I got curious. I wanted to know what happened to organizations in the context of innovation. What happened to innovation when business goes through such a dramatic challenges? Um, so I started to call up and write and talk to clients and colleagues and people that I don't know, and I thought it'd be interesting to hear what they say. And my question was, during this crisis, where do you focus your most of your innovation efforts? Um, and I got really great answers. So from collecting a few hundreds of answers from, I think, from around the world, um, what I see is that um, for most organizations, they will focus on four areas, or some of the following four areas. So first of all is problem solving. So it's crisis. Kids are not going to school. Parents stays at home. People have to work remotely. Stores are closed. There's no supply chain. So you have to put fires out. So a, a great part of the innovation efforts were shifted towards problem solving. So that's one. The second one was adaptations and conversions. So we saw some organization immediately coming up with COVID-19 related solutions, whether it's delivery systems, whether it's a company who makes vacuum cleaners now create pipes for medical equipment. So we see that companies who makes, I don't know, shirts and pants now sell face masks. So that's the second area. The third area was what they called exit strategy. So how could we be best in the game when this is over, assuming that this will be over to a certain extent?
Yeah.
So that's the third area that companies were focusing on, a lot less than the first two. And the fourth area, which for me was kind of phenomenal and exciting, was to realize that some organizations understand that instead of investing in exit strategy, or instead of making sure they'll be best in the game when this is over, They're taking the opportunity to change the rules of the game. Okay, which I
Mhm.
think in terms of strategy, this is brilliant. This is really smart. Um, and
Yeah.
since April, I had the pleasure of working with quite a lot of organizations in each of these four areas, and it works, and it's really interesting. So that was
Mhm.
my insight, my
Yeah.
advice. As okay, I said earlier that I feel that it's kind of unfair to expect people to be able to innovate when they don't learn how to do it, and they don't get the time and resources to do it. Um, I want to say the same thing about business leaders and management. Um, the fact that you're very senior means that you're smart, that you're committed, that you're motivated, that you probably have very good managerial skills, and probably um, because of you have very clear view of reality. It doesn't mean that you understand innovation very good. It makes a lot of sense to get help. And much like anything else, innovation was became a buzz or a trend. And in the first few years, people didn't know what you're talking about and were really suspicious to know that you're an innovation expert. What does it exactly mean? But then 5 years later, every second person is an innovation expert, and everyone who spent 5 years in a high tech company is a consultant. Um, I think that 20 years through this new field, by now we have a lot of data, we have a lot of knowledge, we have a lot of insights, we have much higher resolution than one owns personal experience. We know that some tools are good for some situations, and other tools are better for other situations. We know that you need to be able to pick and choose the right methodology for you, the right approach for you, and not copy paste. What works for Google or Apple or Elbit will not work for you. I guarantee. Um, so I think that what one advice that I would give business leaders um, is get professional help. Get work with people who are expert in that field in a wider sense. Not as that they know one method, and for them everything is
Mhm.
design thinking. Sorry, I don't want to badmouth design thinking. I think it's a great methodology, but not many people know that design thinking works best for designers. And when you apply design thinking with other teams, usually you don't get such good results. Usually, what happens is that you use design thinking because that's what everybody else is doing, even though that for your specific problem, for your specific need, there might be much better methods. We do it. It was brainstorming first, then design thinking, um, and there are trends that are changing all the time. So work with someone who can help you pick and choose the right tools for the right circumstances, the right approach, and also give you the right perspectives to measure.
Yeah. We were just like, we started to talk so many things, and the main thing you want to really understand is think tanks. And I want you to tell me how think tanks could help organizations innovate. And how is it
Okay.
different than what we said till now?
Okay. So I'm going to get a little bit excited, but I'll
That's
explain
good.
why. I'll explain why. Um, I'm very interested in thinking processes, mostly in the context of innovation and problem solving, but also in other areas, politics, education, strategy, wherever thinking has a strong value, a strong impact. Um, Now, some years ago, when talking with clients, it was very evident that because I come from the world of innovation, the conversation will be about some specific issues or products or technologies or processes, etc. And I noticed with time that the conversation changed with many of them. And instead of talking with me about a specific topic, they started to ask me, not implicitly, but to ask me to be more of a sounding board. The message was, look, I'm dealing with this situation now, and it's very complicated. How about if I'll tell you what I'm thinking, and you tell me what you think about my thinking. And when it became more and more apparent, I got curious and I started to pay attention to it, and I realized something that, if up until the 50s, in order for one to be a good manager, you needed to know what your subordinates or your team knows, and have a little more experience, and that was sufficient. Then in the 60s, we realized that this is not enough. It's so knowledge and experience are not enough. You also need a little bit of management tools, and this got boosted in the 70s and the 80s with the McKinsey revolution and all that. So that was great. But in the 90s, we realized that knowledge, experience, management skills are also not enough, and you need some soft skills. Okay, so the
Yeah.
90s were all about also understanding people, managing people. It's all about incentives, it's all about bonding, it's all about communications. Yet our world becoming more and more complicated. The amount of considerations that a manager needs to consider now before making a decision is maybe, I don't know, 20, 30, 50 times higher than 20 years ago. Um, the possible consequences of every decision that a manager makes are huge. Okay, it's just not the black and white go no go world anymore. Now, somebody said once that appliances become smaller, but our fingers stay the same size. Same goes with management. So managing become more and more complex, yet we still think the same way, using the same principles, using the same logic. And I thought that is not sustainable. And I started to look around, and I noticed that in many parts of the world, you see more and more think tanks. People realize that for some questions, it's much better to think not alone. I don't want to say with a lot more people, but not alone. Um, and they started to do that and say, "Oh, I wonder how these think tanks works." And I started to look for some kind of a protocol, some tools or methods or how to run a think tank successfully. And I couldn't find. Well, I found two or three methods or models, but they were so generic and they were mostly managing the room or the process, but having zero impact on the quality of the results. Okay. And what you would expect is not only to have a better thinking process, but also have significantly better in quality results. So, so at SIT, so I came back to SIT. Said, wow, I realized that there's no, the world is going towards thinking with others, and there are no good tools out there. And the answer from SIT was, so how about you create one? So in the last 2.5 years, this is what I was focusing on mostly. First of all, understanding how people think in teams, what works, what doesn't work, to understand the different scenarios, different configurations, different personas, different cognitive skills, different characteristics and traits that we bring in. So try to understand that. Then I started to shop around for tools. Um, and the idea was to collect tools, existing tools. I think that for me it was important that the tools that I'll pick will comply with two conditions. One is that they're been out there for quite some time, and there's strong empirical data to prove that they're working. It's not someone's personal technique or a trend. And the second is that all the tools need to be something that is very, very easy to learn and apply. Okay? So you don't spend days and weeks just learning how to think with others. It's something that you can do on the go. The next step was to start curating, see what works with what. Because the fact that you have, few good tools doesn't mean that they complement each other. So we worked on that, as I mentioned, about 2 years, experimenting with different configurations, different tools, different cultures, different businesses, including working with educational organizations and charity organizations. So I wanted to see, how much of it is generic and it could work for every team, and how much of it is specific and it only works well in some specific circumstances. And that was about a year ago. That ends about a year ago. And we were very happy because we realized that we probably have the first ever think tank operating system. And the next step was, okay, so how do we share it with the world? And then I got a call from a client who are looking for an innovation program, and I shared that with her, and she said, okay, how about if we do that? And my reaction was, well, that's a good idea, but this is kind of it's 1.0, it's still very, very new. And she said, okay, what do you need to be convinced that this is great? That I need a pilot. I said, okay, so let's run a pilot. So for almost a full year, um, we ran a really large pilot, 15 teams, more than 70 people altogether, working for straight 8 months, uh, coming up with just unbelievable results. And we were fortunate enough to do that in real time, so we can compare not only the teams that use this model and the teams who didn't, but we also had teams who were focusing on more research and prediction type of assignments, and teams who are focusing on design assignments. So you also see that. We had a global team, so we had people from different parts of the world, different cultures. So that also really, it was, I don't know, I'm not really, but thank God that was the perfect pilot. So we ended
Yeah.
that a few months ago, and now we're ready to roll. So this is the kind of excited description.
Yeah.
If I need to kind of wear my serious business hat, I would say that thinking with others in some instances is way more productive, smart, efficient than thinking alone. Much like anything else in life, it's something that you can do, just follow your common sense and intuition, or you can use tools and methods or a process that design exactly for that, and probably, if not get you there better and faster, at least prevent you from making very common mistakes.
Yeah.
So that's the idea, and I think it started up from innovation, but clearly this is it absolutely not innovation specific. It's in any situation when you want to do that, then here's a good way to work with a team.
Yeah, it sounds really exciting. In general, I believe that people are built to collaborate and built to think together and built to be as a group and not as individual. Although this is the modern world and this is how most things are done, but as people, as human beings, this is what we are meant to do. So our time is like almost up, and I have to ask you, where could people hear more about think tanks and SIT and really contact you?
So this is really, really easy. My name and address is completely out there on LinkedIn and
Mhm.
Facebook and Clubhouse and on Google. The SAT's website is not only very cool, but also very resourceful in the sense that we have a lot of examples there, a lot of articles. So you don't even need to do a lot more than just read if you're interested, and of course get in touch with me or with us through the website.
Sure. So I want to thank you, Erez. It's been really, really fascinating as always talking to you. It's a pleasure. So thank you for coming.
My pleasure. It was an honor. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it was lots of fun. And to all of you change makers out there, thank you for joining me. You're much invited to visit invincibleinnovation.com, and I'll be here next week, and I'll wait for you for another insightful talk. Have a great day. See ya.